WNST. It was a big week earlier here this week, not just for the Boston Red Sox and the Yankees as the rich got richer at the Major League Baseball winter meetings, but lots of things went on in and around Washington, D.C. and on the Maryland side in Oxon Hill. Marty Conway took in many of those things. He is a sports and marketing executive, longtime Major League Baseball insider and aficionado, and our professor of sports business around here, as well as at Georgetown University. Little doings down there at George Washington University. Rob Manfred speaking to the people, right? Correct?
Yeah. GW. Well, a lot of it had to do with, the panel itself. It was put together by a group of people led by Mark Hyman, who you probably remember from days gone by in Baltimore media.
Mark Hyman worked at the News American when I did. We were colleagues. He doesn't admit that, but I will. Yes.
I thought so. And so he's now, he does similar to what I do, but at GW. And so he was able to get somewhat the band back together with Tim Kirchin and Richard Justice. And they invited Claire Smith, who just went into the Hall of Fame. And they hosted Rob Manfred for a, presentation Q&A type session there. And then they held a networking event after that. But all in all, it was interesting. It was right on the red line, because point being is that it would not have happened had baseball not been able to come together on a labor agreement a few days before that. So while it was scheduled, there was a lot of nervousness about whether it was actually going to come off. But baseball did make the right decision, came to their senses. I mean, it was a no-brainer to just continue on with labor, peace, and prosperity for everybody.
Labor, peace, and prosperity for everyone, says Marty Conway, longtime executive of the Orioles, longtime executive of the Rangers. Dude, you're an old fart like me at this point. I'm 25 years next week. I don't think you ever really, during all those years, when you live with this, when your business, your livelihood, all of that, every 36 months or so, there was not just the talk of a fire, there was the residue of a scorched earth, right? That lasted for 25 years in baseball. This is kind of incredible what's going on, right?
Yeah, no, I have the battle scars to prove it. In fact, the last time baseball did not have labor peace was as I was frankly exiting the game from the Rangers, where we canceled the end of the season, the World Series. I went into the spring wondering whether there would be baseball. Mr. Angelos was not going to field replacement players. And finally, after all was said and done, the episode ended not at the table, not with a deal and a handshake, but in the courtroom. Judge Sonia Sotomayor, who is now Supreme Court Justice, ruled in favor of the players, and the owners had to fold their tent and go back to square one. And I think Major League Baseball, I mean, that was a deep, deep wound, really was, for a lot of people, not just players and owners, people like myself, people that were in front offices who were literally impacted. Their livelihoods were impacted, and their careers, in some cases, were impacted by that dispute.
Yeah, the players didn't lose any money, but I have a feeling you did with sponsors who didn't pay their bills, and your percentage as a sales guy, that was the part of the story that I don't think was ever told, was the people that were really affected. It had nothing to do with Lou Whitaker driving up in a limo to owners' meetings somewhere. It was an ugly, ugly time, and that's all the more reason that why when somebody came on 2 weeks ago and said, well, there's so much money, they'll figure it out, I'm like, oh, no, that's when they don't figure it out, when it involves Peter Angelos and Ted Lerner and these type of guys.
Yeah, no, and it was. I mean, there were layoffs at clubs. Some clubs went into sort of freeze mode. I mean, there were all sorts of austerity type, because nobody had planned for it. Nobody really thought it was going to happen. It truly was Armageddon. And yes, the people that could least afford it, staff members, people that worked at the ballparks, you name it, they were hit hardest. And some people, frankly, have never forgiven baseball. I know that there was a renaissance, so to speak, with Cal Ripken's, magic that he had. But at the end of the day, there were still people who walked from the game. I know them personally, who walked away from the game and have not returned. So yes, every time you would get to this point, it's fair to say you would get the yips as to whether Is there going to be a labor deal, not be a labor deal? Now, having said that, baseball has more money than they've ever had, driven by two real engines, and that is the national television money, which we might be seeing a crest there. But at the end of the day, they have deals up into, I think, through 2021. So this is the last labor deal that is being done in this era of big-time television money, regional sports network money. That's going to be different next time around. But the other engine that they have, which may be firing above national television, is their own revenues through Major League Baseball Advanced Media, the spinoff, the business that they created 10 or 15 years ago now. The business that they created has now become a multi-billion-dollar business, Major League Baseball Advanced Media, making money even on things that are not connected to baseball, doing streaming for the Final Four, stream ESPN platform, do a number of things like that. So is that going to be enough to overtake, what may not be there from some of the major networks? We'll see. So now baseball has settled their CBA. They'll work it out. They'll sign the deal in the near future. Immediately then they'll pivot and start talking to their media partners about the future. And we'll see if during this 5-year period of the CBA, if baseball within 3 years, they need to have renewals, extensions, new media deals so that everybody on both sides can figure out, okay, where do we go from here in terms of giving up revenue? But yeah, if Mark Trumbo, the barometer for me is if Mark Trumbo is a $75 million baseball player, then yeah, things are good because he's, essentially plays one position perhaps and can be a 15 to 18 to $20 million a year player. That's something we never would have thought was reasonable 10 years ago, but that's what it is now.
He is Marty Conway, longtime sports executive and now professor at Georgetown University. You can follow him out on Twitter as well as at LinkedIn, where he writes good words, bigly words. All the craziness in this country with the man we've elected, and I use man very loosely in that category, as well as Castro dying and not even being vilified. I find it fascinating that you could make some great comparisons that Bud Selig is the Fidel Castro of baseball. He kind of came in from the hills, threw out the real commissioner, installed himself, and went to war with the players. Right around that era, the players stuck needles in their arms to juice themselves up and enrich themselves. The owners have all enriched themselves, while the game is sort of in decay from a growth standpoint of real human beings and real buzz and interest and hipness and coolness around the game. And yet, they just put him in the Hall of Fame last week because that's how screwed up the Hall of Fame is. Marvin Miller's not in the Hall of Fame, and Bud Selig, who stopped baseball and did all of these relatively bizarre things through it, but grew revenue, and in the end, that's all that matters, right? To get into the Hall of Fame, grow revenue.
Yeah, grow the game, grow revenue. You look at, again, you can debate, and I think there's a healthy debate on either side as to whether at different times he was good for the game or was problematic for the game. But if you look at, expanding playoffs and reaching into areas like that, again, those are the kind of things. And again,
okay, but that's not the Hall of Fame. I mean, he did some stuff, but did he do anything that you're like, wow? For the owners, wow was look at all the money we're making, and that really has trickled down to the players, as you've pointed out in Mark Trumbo's case, right?
Well, that's why there's not many commissioners in the Hall of Fame. There's really not that many people that you would say they've had that kind of influence on the game. So, Bud has a special relationship with baseball and its current set of owners. First of all, he draws about a $6 million salary as a commissioner emeritus, so he's in pretty good stead. $500,000
after making $30 million a year for the last 20 years, right?
Yeah, and this happened pretty quickly. There really wasn't a period of time where he was really out of the game for a decade or half a decade or something like that. So, but the current group of owners, the current media, they're very favorable towards him. So there were a lot of things in his favor now. But again, I think the biggest thing is the fact that they did not have labor interruptions after he was a big part of a severe interruption of the game. And I think that, again, the lesson learned is everybody who was involved in that at that table learned a really hard lesson that there's no good that comes out of players and owners not being in agreement at all. And so I think you see the NFL, I think you see the NBA. Look, the NBA was in a position a year and a half or so ago where they had new representation for the Players Association, and Michelle Roberts came in and made a lot of noise, and it looked like she was prepared to, go to arms, go to the mattresses, as they say in the, certain parts of Baltimore. But again, a new television deal, lots of revenue coming in. Suddenly it was, why can't we make a deal here and continue on? Is it so bad? Is it something that we can't bridge? So the infusion of media money into sports at every major level, baseball, football, basketball, etc., has been the grease in the wheels that has made the other things that are problematic just say, well, we'll kick that can down the road. And so we'll see. I think with ESPN and others having pretty significant slowdowns in their subscription businesses, I think the next round of media deals, the speculation has already begun, that they're not likely to have the sort of upside that they had in the past. They're going to work very hard to do it. In fact, you see, I think the NFL is starting to blink at what I'm calling it. The NFL is blinking, so to speak. And I think they're going to cut back, if not eliminate, the Thursday package. And I think some of the sports have realized they have saturated to the point where they're just not getting the audience that they need, and the advertising support isn't there. And
they're doing more harm than good.
That may change. So, again, I think the NFL is kind of at that point. Baseball, basketball. Basketball is actually looking at expanding their season by starting in mid-October to try to spread it out more, because right now they're finding with Monday home games and Wednesday home games and things like that, there just isn't an interest in that. So every sport, the NFL was kind of the first to do this, I think. Every sport has looked at the calendar of the year and said, can we be relevant in every month of the year? Let's forget the old notion of in-season, off-season. I think they want to be what I call on-season the entire year. It's like, to me, it's like people who sell insurance, whether they're Geico or State Farm or Farmers, they're selling insurance every day. There's never a day that they don't try to sell insurance. And I think that the major sports executives have looked at something like that and said, why can't we do the same thing? Why do we have to wait for games to be played for us actually to be selling our sport? So,
and then there's Masson.
Yeah, which, by the way, I just, this past week, 40, as you mentioned at the outset, 40 miles away from their home office was the biggest baseball executive meetings, marketing meetings, trade show of the year, and they're not there live. To me, that was sort of, if it wasn't good before, that maybe just be a sign of the apocalypse, that they either didn't have the interest, didn't have the money, didn't have.
Oh, they have the money now. Come on now, they have the money.
Yeah.
Don't
you know what I mean.
Don't play. You starting to sound like Jeff Barker at the Sun now.
No. I mean, what I mean is they didn't want to spend the money.
That would be the same situation with Aroldis Chapman and Chris Sale, and I mean, they do what they do, and then they couch it by saying, they hold their pockets out and there's nothing in them, and where's all the money? Oh, that's in the Hill.
Yeah. Well, trust me, if you think the Oriole fans are ragged about this, national fans in this respect are more, because these meetings are happening as the crow flies a mile or two from Nats Park, and really there isn't any reason why Nats and Orioles presence shouldn't be all over there, and they're not, because their rights holder has chosen not to, for whatever reason, spend the money and be a part of that.
Well, they do that at spring training every year, too. I mean, you sit around in March and you want to see the new players. Yeah. I mean, all they'd have to do is hook up a camera behind home plate, for crying out loud, and feed in Jim Hunter saying something or whatever they do.
Yeah. So, again, these are things that we'll see what happens in the long term, but these are the kind of exposure areas that people look at and say, okay, are you really committed to the game and the sport, or the teams and the fans, or are you not? And I think that's a huge red light. I was taken back almost. I thought, well, maybe they won't be all in, et cetera, but they're not even have a live shot down there. So, it is what it is. So.
Well, we'll let the folks at Major League Baseball Network take care of that. Marty Conway joining us here. He's a sports marketing and media executive, and has been in the business for a long, long time, doing things at Georgetown as a professor. You've been off across the water, right? You're over in Qatar and doing things in advance of the World Cup, correct?
Yep, we were. I was there during a good part of the month of from the end of October through middle of November, Again, we just finished our first group of people that went through the education process, and we had hundreds and hundreds of people go through over the last 18 months, and big ceremony at the end, and now the next process will start. Actually, in a little less than 10 days from now, a week from now, it'll be 6 years to the day before they actually host the World Cup. It's going to be hosted on the final is December 18th of 2022. So it's getting closer. I was able to also spend a little bit of time in Dubai as well and kind of experience some of their sports properties and things. So, things are changing and developing over there, but still, the U.S. is the number one sports market in the world. Everybody wants to know how we do it, how they can do it better. So it doesn't matter whether it's the Middle East or Japan or China. They all have aspirations to be what the U.S. market is for sports and media and collectibles and marketing and uniforms and everything else. So that's what they want to be.
What is interesting for you being a guy that teaches kids about this, there was no precedent, right? I mean, when Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, when these leagues, and even, the NASCARs and all of these things that have evolved since your birth and my birth sometime back in the 60s, these have gone from little club activities that were civic oriented to becoming billion-dollar industries, and all of that has been tugged with people's heartstrings and their interest and their passion, right?
1984. The Summer Olympics in Los Angeles was the birth of the corporate relationship, the extensive mediaization and commercialization of sport. Peter Ueberroth was in a position of leverage with the International Olympic Committee. They had no other bidders for the Olympics after horrible experiences in Moscow and Montreal and places like that.
How about Munich? That didn't go well either, yeah.
No, and so his leverage point was, we'll host the games, but we can't be stuck with any additional cost overruns, et cetera. And so as a result, we want to be able to sell sponsorship to these games and keep the revenue and keep that revenue in arrears for any potential overruns that we have. And he set about in the only way. In fact, if there's a commissioner, quite frankly, of baseball that should be in the Hall of Fame, it would be Peter Ueberroth for what he did in his short 5 years. But he was not popular with the owners because of the decisions that he made along the way. But he literally injected that commercialization DNA from the Olympics into baseball. And from there, it's just been, we've seen the run of official sponsorships, the names on stadium and naming rights, all the way through, what we see. And again, we bring up our favorite example, Mark Trumbo, who benefits from the rope, that benefits from what's gone on the 25 or 30 years before that, not just in baseball, but in sports. But yeah, the 1984 Summer Olympics were the X spot, if you will, where all of this really took hold. And from there, it's just been on a run, an incredible tear of enriching owners, players, and other people who have equity in the games, and comes at the expense of your cable bill, your ticket price, your concession price, and
my $14 beer at Madison Square Garden, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when suddenly did $8, $10, $12 for a beer become accepted? If you ever thought that people just sort of acquiesce and say, well, I guess that's the price of wanting to see it live. So, but we'll see. Things are totally changing. Look, there are markets. I was reading the other day, we're doing a little research project. Minneapolis struggling bad with all of their franchises. The live event experience is under siege, and unless you're at the very top of the game, the Golden State Warriors or the College Football Championship or something like that, there are a lot of other places, Washington for a Wizards game, other things where the attendance just isn't there. So you have to walk a fine line now as a marketing professional in sports. You really need a top-flight contending team, and you need some excitement and sizzle because anybody under the age of 30 doesn't think that they have to go to a game to really get the experience that we did when we were growing up. They think they can get that through their social experience, through the phone, through digital, through YouTube, through Netflix, whatever it is, and they really don't need that live game experience. So I think that's the next challenge on the horizon for just about all professional sports and now college athletics.
He is Marty Conway, sports and marketing executive. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Marty Conway, as well as on LinkedIn if you're out in the business community. And I was going to bring up the empty seats at the Wizards and all that stuff, and what a bummer it is, kind of all the way around. And then this bowl season is going to happen, right? And it's going to be 4 games a day where nobody's at any of the games, right?
Yeah. I stopped a few years ago. I stopped even referring to them as bowls because they're not. You and I know what a bowl was. It was the Rose Bowl. It was those games on New Year's Day and in and around New Year's Day. Those were truly bowl games. These are just the 13th game of the season. If New Mexico is going to play somebody else in the Gildan, New Mexico Bowl, that's not a bowl game. That's just another college football game in December to extend the season, to give coaches 15 more practices, and to give, other opportunities. So these are no longer bowl games. They're just additional football games. And I think you'll see for the most part, except for, the traditional New Year's Day, Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, places like that, those will draw what they need to. But everybody else, the Bahamas and Toronto and Detroit and you name it, Annapolis for the Military Bowl, the crowds will be meager and totally dependent upon the weather or getting a local team of some interest into the game. So for intents and purposes, the bowl season is over. That was a term that went away, I think, a decade ago, probably now.
You mean Maryland fans don't want to be in Detroit 2:30 the day after Christmas?
I think I suspect not, but you know what? Let's all of us listening tune in to see. I think we'll find out that they probably don't be. There might be some people in those seats, but I bet they won't be Maryland fans. They might be dressed as Maryland fans. They might be local people who have been, encouraged or paid to be dressed as Maryland fans. Who knows?
Yeah, well, if we can't beat the Patriots on Monday night and the Orioles can't beat the Red Sox, maybe the Terps could beat Boston College. I mean, who knows? So, Marty, take care of yourself. Yeah, something like that. Hey, I'm holding out the best for the Ravens. I think they're going to win on Monday night. Always a pleasure to check in with you. I'm glad to have you back in the United States of America. I'll check in again sometime during the non-bowl season, and we'll chirp some more about the offseason and the NFL playoffs, all right?
Okay, we'll keep in touch.
You got it. Love me some Marty Conway, one of our favorite guests to have on here at WNST.net. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Marty Conway. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app, becoming crystal clear. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox. That's brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Go to PlanetOfTriumphs.com. Get a little inspiration up there. I'm not telling you to not eat the cookies and drink the eggnog. Please do, but then consider Planet Fitness afterward. Last but never least, breaking news will happen first on the WNST Tech Service all weekend long. You get it first there. If there's injuries, if the Orioles do something beyond Rule 5 picks, which they did on Thursday morning. You get it there first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home as he always does. I'm Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.